welcome in everyone to another Depth Dive.
Yeah, looking forward to this one.
Me too. I think sometimes we get so caught up in the technical aspects of language learning
Right.
that we forget about these really essential life skills, right?
Yeah.
Like how do we talk about our feelings?
Yeah.
Or how do we talk about our mental well-being? And in English especially.
Especially in another language.
Right, exactly. So today we're going to be diving into a really cool resource called Let's Talk Mental Health Real English for Real Life.
That's a great title.
I know, right? And our goal today is to pull out some of the most practical, the most natural English expressions so you can feel really comfortable talking about things like stress, burnout, anxiety, even, the process of recovery.
So our listeners will be able to have these important conversations with more confidence, maybe even understand themselves better.
Exactly. And, it's all about feeling equipped, not feeling overwhelmed by the language itself.
Right, yeah. Like you said, focusing on the practical skill.
Okay, so let's jump right in with some key vocabulary from our source. And the first one that really stood out to me is burnout. It's, how do I describe this? It's that feeling of just complete exhaustion. Like you've just hit a wall, often from too much stress for too long. Our source gives us the example she took a break after suffering from burnout. So you can see it's more than just being tired.
Yeah, it's definitely a deeper level of depletion.
Yeah, and what's interesting to me is how the use of the term burnout has become so common now.
It has, hasn't it?
It's like society is finally recognizing the impact of chronic stress.
Right, we're moving away from just labeling it as laziness or something.
Exactly. Okay, so next up we have overwhelmed. This is that feeling when you just have too much on your plate.
You just can't even.
You can't even, like the example says, he felt overwhelmed by all the deadlines.
Yeah.
We've all been there, right?
Yeah. I think that's a universal feeling these days.
It really is. It's that feeling of not being able to cope with the sheer volume of everything coming at you.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Okay, now let's talk about mindfulness. Now, you hear this word everywhere these days, right? But what does it actually mean? It's really about paying attention to the present moment.
Right. The here and now.
Exactly. Noticing your thoughts and feelings, but without judgment. The example they give is, practicing mindfulness helped him reduce anxiety. So you see, it's not just some airy-fairy concept. It can actually be a really helpful tool for managing stress.
Yeah, it's a very practical thing.
It is. Okay, now sometimes, even when we try to be mindful, we might hit a mental block.
Oh, tell me about it.
Right, it's like suddenly your brain just freezes.
Yeah, you can't think straight.
You can't think, you can't remember things. Like the example, I had a mental block during the presentation. It can happen to anyone.
Especially in high-pressure situations.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Okay, and finally, in this first set of vocabulary, we have self-care. And I think this is so important because it's really about taking care of yourself, right? Both mentally and physically. And it doesn't have to be anything huge. Like the example says, taking a walk is a simple act of self-care. It's about making those small choices to look after yourself.
Little things add up.
They really do. They really do. Okay, so we've got these kind of core concepts, right? Now, let's move on to something a little more advanced, something that can really level up your communication skills.
Let's get into it.
All right. Phrasal verbs. Those tricky combinations of verbs and prepositions that can make English seem so mysterious sometimes.
They can trip you up, but they're so valuable for sounding fluent and natural.
Exactly. So our source has a great selection of these, and I think they really capture the nuances of talking about mental health. So first up, we have open up. This means to be willing to share your thoughts and feelings honestly.
Right. It implies a sense of vulnerability and trust.
Exactly. They give us two examples. She finally opened up to her friend, so you can see that connection, that act of sharing, and then it's hard for him to open up about stress.
That resonates with a lot of people, I think.
Oh, absolutely. It's not always easy to let those feelings out.
And And on the flip side of that, we have bottle up, which is essentially the opposite of opening up, right?
Right. It's about holding it all in.
Keeping it all
And
inside.
the examples are really powerful. Don't bottle up your emotions, which, good advice, right?
Not healthy.
Not healthy at all. And then he bottled up stress until he exploded. So you can see the potential consequences there.
Yeah, it's like a pressure cooker.
It really is.
Mm.
Okay, next we have breakdown, and this is, well, it's about losing control of your emotions, often to the point of tears.
A very raw and real experience.
It is, it is. The examples are, she broke down after the news, so you can see that immediate, that intense reaction to something upsetting, and then you don't need to be ashamed if you break down, which I think is so important to hear, It's a message of self-compassion.
It is. It is. It's about normalizing those really human moments of vulnerability.
It reminds us that it's okay to not always be strong on the outside.
Yeah. Okay, the last phrasal verb we're going to look at is work through, which means to deal with those difficult feelings, to process them over time.
It suggests a journey, a process.
Exactly. It's not a quick fix. The examples they give are he's working through past trauma in therapy, and give yourself time to work through pain. You can see that it's a process that requires patience and effort.
Mm-hmm. It's about acknowledging that healing takes time.
It really does.
Oh.
Okay, so these phrasal verbs they're fantastic for really adding that nuance and depth to how you express yourself. Now let's move on to collocations, which are those natural pairings of words that just go together,
Like peanut butter and jelly.
Exactly, like peanut butter and jelly. And our source highlights some really common ones that are used all the time when we're talking about mental health.
And these are great for sounding natural and fluent.
Right.
Totally, totally. So one you'll hear all the time is suffer from anxiety, like many teenagers suffer from anxiety, or she started therapy because she suffered from anxiety. It's a very common way to describe that ongoing experience of anxiety.
It really emphasizes the severity and the impact of it.
Yeah, for sure. Now, another phrase that's thankfully becoming more and more common and accepted is take a mental health day.
Yeah, it's a good sign, isn't it?
It is. It is. It's about recognizing when you need to prioritize your mental well-being, Like he took a mental health day off work, or it's okay to take a mental health day. It's about giving yourself permission to rest and recharge.
It's a sign of self-awareness and self-compassion.
It really is. And then we have reach out for help, which I think is so crucial.
Essential, really.
Yeah. It's about acknowledging that you need support and then actually asking for it. The examples they give are don't hesitate to reach out for help, and reaching out for help is a strength,
It takes courage to do that.
It really does. It's not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of strength. Okay, and finally in this section we have feel emotionally drained. And this is, it's that feeling of just being completely wiped out emotionally.
Like you have nothing left to give.
Exactly. Like after the meeting, I felt emotionally drained. Or caregivers often feel emotionally drained. So you can see it can happen in all sorts of situations.
Especially those that involve a lot of emotional labor.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've covered a lot of vocabulary here, but our source also has this really helpful section on common mistakes.
Oh, this is gold for language learners.
It is, because sometimes those little errors can really trip you up. So let's go through a few of them, right? One that learners often make is saying, I feel depression. Now, the correct way is, I feel depressed.
Yes, the classic noun versus adjective mistake.
Exactly. Depression is the noun, the condition.
Yeah.
But depressed is the adjective, how you're feeling.
Important distinction.
It is. Okay, another common one is I'm stressed. The correct way is either I'm stressed or I feel stressed. Again, you need that adjective form.
I see a pattern here.
Right. We need those adjectives. And then if you want to talk about a problem, make sure to say, I want to talk about my problem, not I want to talk my problem. That little preposition about is so important for correct grammar.
It's easy to forget those little words.
It is. And finally, you might hear someone say, she is very burnout. The correct way is, she is burnt out. You're using the past participle burnt out as an adjective there to describe her state.
So it's not burnout, it's burnt out.
Burned out, exactly. Okay, so I think by paying attention to these common errors, you can really refine your English and sound much more confident. And our source has this fun little challenge to help you actually practice what we've learned today.
Oh, I like challenges. Let's hear it.
Right. Me too. So the challenge is think back to a time when you felt overwhelmed, really overwhelmed. We've all been there. Now, try to describe that experience to yourself out loud or even just in your head, using at least 2 of the phrasal verbs and 2 of the collocations we've talked about today.
I love that. It's putting the language into action.
Exactly. And our source gives us a really helpful example. Last month, I was completely burnt out from work. I had bottled up my stress for weeks. Eventually, I broke down and decided to take a mental health day. So you see how they've woven in those phrases. Try it yourself and see what you come up with.
That's a great way to internalize the language.
It really is. Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, I think it's important to step back and think about the bigger picture here.
Absolutely. What's the takeaway for our listeners?
Well, on the surface level, we've gained all this amazing vocabulary related to mental health, right? But it's so much more than that. It's about being able to express yourself clearly, to understand others when they're talking about their experiences.
It's about building emotional fluency in English, which is a really powerful thing.
It really is. And our source suggests some great ways to keep learning. Like, why not keep a mental health vocabulary journal?
I love that idea.
Right. You can write down new words, new phrases you come across, and you can even just talk to yourself in English about your day. Like, I'm feeling a little emotionally drained today, or I need to practice some self-care. Those little things can make a big difference.
And what about engaging with English content related to mental health?
Oh, that's a great point. Our source recommends checking out online forums, maybe support groups, where native speakers are having these conversations.
That's a great way to see the language in action.
Totally. And also, listening to podcasts about mental health or therapy can be really helpful, too.
Yeah, you're immersing yourself in the language and the topic.
Exactly. So I think our source said it best. Mental health is a journey, not a destination. By learning to express emotions in English, you're not just improving language, you're building emotional fluency. So don't bottle it up. Speak up, learn, and grow.
Powerful words. And so true.
Absolutely. And I want to thank everyone for joining us for this deep dive.
Yes, thank you.
We hope you found it insightful and helpful. And as always, we'd love to hear from you.
Absolutely. Leave us a comment. Let us know your thoughts, any questions you might have.
Until next time, take good care of yourselves.
And each other.
Goodbye for now.
Bye.